name is Kat van der Werff and I'm the Executive Creative Director at Canva. It's my first time judging at LIA and in fact any judging, so I'm really excited to be here and I'm really enjoying the process so far. What I love is that the judging panel is from all different places in the world and cultural backgrounds and levels of experience in the industry, so it's really nice to have such a diverse set of people, and I'm really excited to get into the discussion part. Today we're in the still kind of working solo and moving through getting to the kind of top of the list. But yeah, we're in pre-judging at the moment, which is basically looking through a lot of work and deciding what kind of stays in or goes out, and we're kind of working in this solo space. But it's great to be all together doing it rather than doing the pre-judging like at home in your living room with your like kids running around. So the trends that I am seeing in the work is, I think one trend is definitely the rise of a focus on Gen Z as an audience, and it's kind of interesting to see this kind of work because I think that particularly for the Gen Zs themselves, they can tell when it's like a millennial like me trying to create something in the Gen Z space versus actually being informed by that audience at the heart. So whenever we create anything at Canva that's speaking to that audience, like I always make sure that the Gen Zs in the team are part of the project, so it actually has their voice coming through. So I think one thing I'm seeing is that you can kind of see when it's focused on Gen Z and there's like really kind of insight and intention behind the work versus, I guess, like just like this absolute clash of, it's almost anti-design. It's kind of like this collage of identities and styles and tropes that kind of come into that. Interestingly, there's no really strict criteria in terms of like in my own mind, I kind of think about it as creativity and originality and then craft and then also kind of business results and is it meeting the brief. But the way they've kind of set it up is actually quite free and like really focused on the fact that the panel itself has such a wealth of experience that there's a lot of intuition that comes into the process, and then it's the coming together and discussing all of the work that will help kind of weed out the kind of subjectivity and the bias that could go into it. But I think, I guess, like obviously the judging has different categories. And so if I'm in the space of looking at, in the copywriting category, I'm obviously really focused on the words versus the design itself. Yeah, so there is actually, for the kind of aspect of culture marketing, there's definitely different sections within the awards that are really focused on a local culture section or a regional culture section. But I think what's really interesting in that space is seeing the work that within a local culture, it's actually getting picked up by communities and people on social. And so the brands that do it really well are actually listening to what their community is doing and the way they're bringing things to life or talking about the brand already out in the world, and almost like taking that as the insight to bring back into the work that they are doing. And so it's like that kind of that listening piece of really kind of listening to what's already going on in culture. It's been really interesting. I actually have seen in the submissions this year actually this return to handcraftedness, and there's a lot of beautiful work that's really starting in the analog phase of, it's like the process of making that actually gets you to something really interesting and maybe even surprising that you wouldn't know you had if you didn't go through the process itself. And then there's like this blending of that analog discovery with AI once it kind of gets moved into the digital space, and they're using AI tools to kind of enhance things or use it to kind of scale the work that they've created in the analog space. I think that there's definitely the trend of moving to in-house is growing and growing, and I love to see it because it means that we just have so much more amazing creative people on the brand side, like working in-house. And when you're in-house, because you're so much closer to the brand, you can actually have a lot more impact because you're kind of right there with product development and right there with the founders and right there with the kind of like heart and soul of a company. And it's so nice to see that in-house agencies are starting to be noticed in the world because they're actually doing just as amazing work, if not better, than going out of house. But I actually think a part of that too is we're kind of moving into the space now with how much content brands need to create, that you have to do so much more with so much less. And it's almost like now, instead of one big campaign every season, it's like actually ideas that can respond to culture almost like on a daily basis. And so when you're working at that kind of speed, being in-house and being close to the brand means that you do, like you can kind of shortcut the brief process and just go with intuition of like, what would this brand do in the world in response to this? I think that creative agencies are still always going to be really important. Like the way that we work at Canva is we do a lot in-house, but we also get so much value out of working with agency partners. And an example of that for us is when you are turning up into markets that you don't have your own team in. So Japan, for example, when we started doing brand advertising work in Japan, we worked with a local agency there because they knew the culture and like we didn't have anyone on the ground there. And so, or another example is we work with an incredible animation and illustration and motion house at times, and it's just that kind of like deep level of craft and expertise that you sometimes need to bring in to help elevate the work as well. So I do think it's like both, like having both is really good. I think the biggest challenges and opportunities, I guess, they probably go hand in hand, I guess. When we think about the challenges that we have today, like obviously AI is like a huge topic of conversation for everyone. And it's almost like when a new technology gets introduced, it always kind of starts with fear. But the opportunity is to like move from fear into curiosity and like actually kind of like wade in and like try these things and see how they could actually really help bring things to life. And I think we do that at Canva a lot. It's like the kind of like is no space for fear. It's more like, hey, just like play with the stuff. It's integrated into our product really deeply, and it's more about like experimenting and seeing how it can actually help design and creativity. And I do think like the more tools that we have in our toolkit as creatives, like it can only make for better work. And what rises to the top is still original thought and imagination and storytelling and like all of the really intuitive human aspects that are so important to design and creativity, no matter what the tools are supporting that.